I guess we'll officially kick this video off with describing what our topic is. And it's important for me to say this. This was Kristen's idea.
I don't remember.
But she has no recall. It'll have to be another topic for another day to talk about perimenopause.
We really need to, yes. Next topic.
If you remember. If she remembers.
Can you write that down? Next live will be on perimenopause because we have some things to say about that.
It seems to be like, you know, like a real conversation happening in a lot of places. I kind of feel like, you know, Oprah covered it, I think, and she had some like live special a few weeks ago that she talked about it.
Apparently Angela and I were talking a few weeks ago and she brought something up and I said, that is a great live topic. Mm-hmm. And then I rediscovered it today.
Right. I was like, do you remember you had an idea? And she's like, what are you talking about?
I think it's great.
Yeah. So, as we always like to do, the topic today, we're referring to it, we're calling it, the name of this video is Life Gardeners. And that's my way of putting like a positive spin on a topic that Kristen is
you feel very positive about.
No, but I'm good. Here's what we're going to do. And let me give you a little context here. Life Gardeners is the name of the video, but let me back up why we're calling it this. So it is based on the concept of a style of communication of which people plant seeds to achieve an outcome they're looking for. Whether this is they're planting a seed to get something they want, to get something that they need. But another way, because I think that's a pleasant way of probably phrasing it, is the difference between indirect communicators and direct communicators. Now, if you've spent more than 30 minutes with myself or Kristen in any aspect of life, you will already know that both of us are very direct communicators. There's a whole bunch of different reasons for that. It could be, you know, I think we live in an area culturally, you know, the Baltimore area, we're kind of gritty and direct. We definitely are not of, even though we're kind of mid-Atlantic, I would tell you we don't kind of follow the cultural norm of the South of kind of like sweet and slow talking and like, you know, we're definitely like direct, not sweet. I would say culturally. So I think part of it is the area in which we spend our lives. But I also think nurture versus nature contributes a lot to that, and experiences and the people who surround you in your life, friends, family, professionally, you name it. A lot of things go into that. So, but again, I think being a life gardener is a nice way of kind of phrasing a communication style of either, you know, of being an indirect communicator. So even though I myself most certainly subscribe to being a direct communicator, and I, quite frankly, it's a real struggle for me, and it has been a lifelong journey of kind of teaching myself to put a lot of thought before I go into a conversation, how to phrase things, the right words to use, the right tone to use, the right, you know, body language. Like, this is something, it's an art. It's not just a skill, but I also think it's an art that you continue to work on and hone your entire life. Hopefully before you get to the phase of what we call, I don't give a shit. When people get older and they stop caring. And they, you know, and so hopefully you've kind of like worked on it and like, you know, done your best to hone your craft before you get much older where you just stop caring about, you know, how you present yourself. But that's the way I see. So even though I take that view, I am today, for the purposes of this conversation, going to take on speaking about some positive things about what it is to be a life gardener. And Kristen is going to take on the view of the challenges and some not so positive aspects of being an indirect communicator, and how we'll have examples of different
I have
situations.
A hammer. I'm just
right. Yep. And
not because it's bad or this is good, because I struggle with it because of my communication style. That's all.
Yeah. And everybody's different, and Chris and I have a tendency to seek out, I feel like a lot of times, people and situations that are different than us. It's definitely, I think, a common bond. Even though Chris and I are basically polar opposites in almost every way.
Even though we look like twins, like it's hard to tell who's Kristen and who's Angela in these lives.
They get us confused all the time.
But we're actually pretty different.
Yeah. And so, but we have like core values and I think certain aspects of ourselves. And even though we both are very direct communicators with each other and with other people, that we have a lot of people in our life in all the different aspects, family, friends, you know,
even in my literally in my own home, I have a mix of you know, different communication styles.
Yeah. So that's what we're gonna do today.
Let's do it.
So do you want to start off by like do you want me to give a couple examples? Do you want to give a couple examples? What do you want to do?
I want you to start because I think my stuff plays off of your stuff.
Okay. Fair enough. So an example I will give, and to me in a very positive way, is a person who is hands down one of the top 3 people who I was close to my entire life.
And I will say, even when you first brought this up, because the conversation did start to come back to me, you were speaking about it in a positive way.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were like, this person's genius.
And where this all came from was a couple weeks ago, we were in a conversation with another person and we were talking about my mom. And so my mom and I are very different people. But there was a lot of intent behind how my mom raised me.
Yeah.
Even though Filipino culture tends to be a little matriarchal leaning, there's still that kind of overarching Asian influence of not being a direct communicator and certainly kind of taking a passive approach in some situations, kind of having some like very traditional roles, if that's in fact the role as a mom that you're following. My mom's mom, however, was far from a traditional nurturing type. She was a boss. She was a very matriarchal woman who many people have said and made the comparison between her and I because she was a businesswoman. And I kind of knew since like elementary school that someday I would have like my own business for businesses. And I think, and also kind of my more direct personality, I think some people kind of connected back to my grandma, my Lola.
Also, they would call it like a stronger personality.
Yeah. Strong, like a strong woman.
Yeah.
Like period.
Yep.
But that's not who my mom was. But I think she
was strong in different ways.
Yes. But me being the third and the youngest child in the family, and her being someone who immigrated to this country and kind of, with the first 2 kids, my brother and sister are 9 and 10 years older than me. By the time I came along, I think she was like, I want to make sure that my daughter has a voice.
Yeah. And
she very much raised me to have a voice. She raised me to have an identity, to be confident in who I was. Her and my father were always like very, like they really know me is how I would describe it. And I don't know if that's the thing that like a lot of children would say about their parents. Like, does my parent really know me? And I feel like they knew me at a very young age and really advocated and supported me becoming me. And, and
it was very, because I grew up, with her, it was very tangible and very clearly intentional that that in particular your mom was raising you this way.
Yeah. So again, as different as she was, but here's what's interesting. As we were having this conversation a couple weeks ago, and this whole concept like came up in talking specifically about how my mom was masterful, like literally master's degree level, when it came to the ability to get the outcomes that she was looking for in terms of things she wants or needed in life. And really not only like what she wanted, but how she wanted it to come about without ever really asking directly for it. She knew how to, and this is the Life Gardener piece, plant seeds. She was very good at like planting a seed. And this wasn't like, the greatest example of this would probably be with my dad, in terms of like their dynamic. Interestingly enough, I always felt like my dad is the person who kind of taught me how to be a direct communicator. But let me tell you what, she had this ability with him to not really ask directly for something or say, this is what I want or this is what I need, but plants seeds that he had no clue were even being planted. And then he would do this, whatever it was for her, and then carry so much pride, by the way. He would feel so proud of himself because it was like, I had this great idea, and he always thought it was his idea.
Yeah.
Every single time. And a perfect example is Kristen.
Which is a wife trick, by the way. Like,
well, this is what I'm saying. It's a skill set.
Yeah.
Like, something, quite frankly, lost on us direct communicators. Like,
really?
And you've got the other side of this, by the way, because there's also people who won't say what they want and then be disappointed later.
Yeah.
Right? And I will tell you, those type of people frustrate me, and they frustrate you to no end. But she had a way in her communication style to drop those little seeds, plant those little seeds, and get what she wanted.
But I mean, I can also see the positive in that too, because what a great thing to want that person to take the credit and want them to feel good about themselves and want them to feel, proud.
But you're still accomplishing an agenda.
But I'm not completely convinced that she, at least at first, maybe later in life she figured it out, but I don't think it was like intentional at first, but she figured out over time, like, oh, that worked. Like, but I don't even know if it was intentional. And if it was from a selfless place. I don't know.
I think it's very natural and normal, when you have people who you love and care about in your life and then they pass away and you want to idealize,
remember the good stuff.
But the reality is that my mom, like any other human being on this planet, was not a perfect person, and there were, conflicts. And I would tell you, at the heart of conflicts between my mom and I, it did come down to her and I being on kind of opposite ends of direct and indirect communication. I think over life, and as I matured and as I became a wife and as I became a mom, I started to have a greater appreciation for her communication style.
Yeah.
And the fact that, like, she had a 53-year marriage, where they were very deeply in love, not perfect, absolutely had their conflicts, absolutely had their fights, absolutely had their challenges and their problems. But at the end of the day, they navigated every single thing together.
Yeah. And
they had each other's back, and they saw each other through some really difficult times in life and in family. And they, again, it's not to idealize what they were, because they had their problems like every single married couple has. But I can't help but like have an appreciation for the fact that my mom like spent 53 years and my dad, now, when you talk about idealizing somebody after they pass away, boy, oh boy, has my dad done that. And I think it's just kind of a normal grieving thing. He doesn't remember a single negative thing about my mom at this point. He has not one single negative memory about her. And she really did a good job of like always having him think it was his idea. And one great example, 2002, me and you and two other friends went to Hawaii.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
And
2001.
My parents had been there before. But and my mom really, of course, loved it, but they hadn't been in quite some time, and came back from Hawaii and showed the pictures and videos and like all the stuff that we did while they were there. And not at the moment, I didn't know that this was going on, but as my mom was like seeing the pictures and hearing things, she would be saying things like, Joe, do you see this? Oh, that looks so nice. Wouldn't that be fun? Oh, I don't think we did that last time we were there. Did we do that? And then do you remember when we did this or we did that? Oh, that was so fun. Wasn't that such a good time?
Do you think she knew what she was doing?
100%. 100% knew what she was doing. More. And the next thing you know, damn if my parents were not in Hawaii
the next
6
year,
months later.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't even a full year. So I look back, and that's just like one example of something that, my mom had mastered, like knowing my dad so deeply, knowing how to communicate with him, and successfully achieving what she wanted, but at the same time, not having to like say, will you take me to Hawaii?
Yeah.
She could just, say enough. And then again, in his mind, he was like, he totally thought of this on his own. He's like, yeah. And this man, he would be, if the winterling look of satisfaction in our
They
family.
pat themselves on the back hard. So you're awesome. This is a great trip.
So
I can see
so
it.
yeah, so it's that's kind of, I think, a really good example for me as a life gardener, as somebody who has a master's degree in this particular communication skill set, who would be my mom. And by the way, she did this with not just my father, really with anybody in life. I mean, she certainly had this down with me and my brother and my sister.
Like, it makes me wonder, did she and do other people that do this do it because they think that communicating directly is wrong? It feels wrong to them. And they're annoyed when we do it. It feels aggressive.
For sure would say, I can't speak for everybody.
Why?
But I can.
Why can't you?
Because I can't. But I can, in terms of like what because I know my parents, I know my mom very deeply, and I would say yes, like speaking directly felt aggressive to her. It felt rude.
Yeah.
Definitely. It felt inconsiderate.
Most of the Philippines thinks I'm pretty rude. As
Kristen's going to speak for the entire country at this point.
The Philippines.
The Philippines thinks that Kristen is rude.
7,000 islands.
Now, by the way, that's not true.
What?
It's either rude or funny.
Or they're laughing because they're uncomfortable because you're being so rude.
But that's still funny.
Okay.
And I will tell you, growing up around my Filipino relatives, I was like, this is the only group of people that apparently think I am an absolute hilarious stand-up comedian, because they are laughing at me constantly. And it wasn't until I got older that I was like, they're laughing because they feel awkward because they're not used to me. They're used to being around people who are so direct.
Yeah.
And they're like, she must be kidding. That's, and so, yeah, I have, I mean, I'm a little funny. I can be a little funny.
She can be funny.
I wouldn't say that.
You strike my funny bone sometimes.
I haven't been around people who apparently think I'm as funny as
they do. They laugh.
That's like the family because they are literally like borderline tears sometimes. And it was like that when I went to live in the Philippines too. That I had that same reaction, and I also had tears because I was very direct with some of the locals. And they didn't.
She lived in the Philippines for
almost 6 months.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so there's my example. Looking at it as its positive skill set, looking at it as something that achieved positive things, not just getting what she wanted, but like also other people feeling good about,
She lived a very satisfied life because she accomplished what she wanted to, and had a very successful marriage because he felt good about himself.
My mom had a lot of friends, like genuine friends, and same situation. Like, I mean, she very rarely had to ask.
Yeah.
She didn't drive ever in her entire life. And she grew up in the city in the Philippines, and then met my dad in Germany, and also lived in the city there, and then moved to the States and initially lived in the city.
She never drove, and she never had to, and she never needed to ride anywhere because
people would literally call my mom and offer to drive her all the time. So it's that's my positive take. But Kristen, share with us.
Did we really sound positive? Lisa, did we sound positive? Did she sound positive?
Yeah.
Okay. And when the conversation first originally came up, it was definitely, like I said earlier, in a positive light. She was like, God, I really got to hand it to my mom, because like she was a mastermind. Like she figured it out, like how to like get what you want and be happy and keep those around you happy, and not have to sacrifice the nature of her communication style, like who she really was and what was comfortable to her and what felt right to her. I don't know how I got to be. I mean, I'm borderline aggressive. I'm definitely aggressive in some situations, like when I'm advocating for someone I love. When I advocate for someone that I love, like, for example, my lovely husband was in the emergency room Tuesday night, and I said, you have to call me when the doctor comes in, because I will question them and I need to talk to them, because I felt like as an advocate, it's important to me to ask the right questions, to really feel satisfied with the diagnosis before we walk away from that situation.
I would also say that for a number of different reasons of you being such a direct communicator, quite frankly, unfortunately having to be in a health advocacy position with your parents, with your brother, with grandparents, like there's been so many situations.
I wish I would have been this way back in 2005 when my brother was sick. I feel like,
but we were still pretty young at that point.
But with my mom, with my dad, with my husband, like anybody,
and being a direct communicator,
my dad would say,
must. You can't.
My dad would say to the doctor, "Look out, here comes the pit bull." And I'd say, "You're lucky and blessed to have a pit bull in your life who's like looking at the charts and like paying attention to these things." So
meanwhile, the doctor is like, "Let me inject her with a little sedative."
I actually had a doctor say, like, I think he left like Archie's case like in 2018 because he was like, "What is wrong with this woman? Why is she asking me so many questions?" Anyway, long story short, it can be positive. It can also be negative to be direct communicator to the extent that I consider myself to be. I really struggle with people who are indirect communicators. And the challenge that I've had is the more indirect they are, the more direct I become. And that's when it reaches a level of aggression. I'm not like hurting anyone, but like aggressive.
It doesn't really send a signal to like back off.
No, my words get more, like sound more abrupt.
I mean, like not even just words. If somebody's trying to leave a conversation, you'd follow them right out of the room.
Yeah.
And I know for me, if I feel like I'm in a conversation with someone, I need to feel a sense of like, this conversation's come to a close.
Yeah.
Like, don't
before
just,
you leave the room.
There's a person in my life who literally, if they decided that the conversation's done and I'm like, we haven't even resolved anything, we haven't really had a conversation, they'll start to just like
inch towards the door.
And I'm like, where are you going? Get back here. So
anyway, I struggle with this type of communication in work and in life. It's created a big challenge in some work situations where we are so lean and so efficient and there is not a minute to spare. We get so much done in a day and we need to stay that way. Like it's intentional that we run our business that way. And when someone is an indirect communicator, we've had several over the years, and then it leaves the question for like, well, I don't really understand what the problem is or what's going on with this certain task. And at the end of the day, I can't help find a solution if it's not clear to me what the problem is. So, and I will say, having a best friend for my whole life who is the main person that I communicate with outside of my marriage, I'm used to it and I almost need it. Like I don't read between the lines. I don't understand when someone's trying to plant a seed, it's going to go over my head.
Both of us have told that.
If your mom was married to me, she would have never gone to Hawaii. Hawaii's off the table. I wouldn't get it unless she literally put a big sign in front of me that said, "Take me to Hawaii."
Right. Yep. And I feel like that's something we've communicated to many people. We don't speak in between the lines.
Yeah.
We don't understand it.
I'll miss the boat. I will completely miss the boat.
Here's how far I would take this, by the way. You and I both have been guilty of being suspicious of people who are indirect communicators.
Yeah, because to me it feels like they're hiding something.
Yes. And that's what it is. What aren't you saying?
Why aren't you saying it?
Yeah,
what's wrong?
If you're like running around a topic, or if there's clearly a problem and you're not bringing this up, it's being communicated in other ways. It's being communicated in their attitude. It's being communicated in their avoidance. It's been communicated in, their, maybe in work, like lack of following an instruction, lack of respecting a deadline,
it's
the message is still coming through. But when we finally catch on, because again, we don't speak in between the lines fluently, we need a translator. When we finally catch on, it's like, well, I'm suspicious of this person. What's wrong with them? Like what's bad about them? Yeah. I mean, would you say that that's how far it goes? Like
it can.
Yeah.
Depending on the vibes from that person.
Yeah.
There's people I haven't felt that way with.
Like, we believe there's bad intent.
Yeah.
The intent is to cause harm.
Yeah. Because ultimately it will affect our ability to work to a solution if we can't just talk about the problem. You can't get to the solution. And then ultimately it completely affects performance of that person's job, their manager's job, and the business as a whole.
So I say all of this very clear on like what you and I think and what we feel and who we are and how we communicate. But I also have learned over years and over life to empathize and do my best to intentionally put myself in other people's views. And I will say I've very much learned and come to understand, to the best of my ability, indirect communicators. And that it's, in many cases, for some people, absolutely painful. It's beyond a discomfort.
Yeah,
it's beyond
painful.
it is become some conflict, any degree of confrontation, anything like that is become so painful that anything to avoid that situation is justified for them.
Yes. So I think part of what has helped us to see the positives in it is we both have had people in our life that we are protective of, that are that way. And it makes us stop and be a little more sensitive and a little more understanding and empathetic to how their brain works. I mean, really, it is how people's brain works. It's frustrating for me. It's probably frustrating for them. Ask Archie; he'll tell you. It drives him crazy the way I communicate because I call him passive aggressive and he calls me aggressive aggressive. That's what